hear, the more sense, right? And then you just work your way until you come up a little bit, you go down a little bit, and finally there's no sense, or maybe there'll be a really slow wobble. Whoa, 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 like that. That means you've gotten it really close. You're down to about 1 cent per 5 seconds or so. Pianos have to be tuned 2 cents per 5 seconds flat in order to come out even at the top. What I'm saying is, by the time you get to the top, if you do it in pure tuning, your C might be about 6 cents sharps at the top. Okay? Now, the piano is the only one that does that. Thank goodness, our bands, our choirs, and our orchestras can play and sing in perfect tuning. But what we really do when we say we're going to play or sing in perfect tuning, we don't actually say that. But somebody will stop you and say, tenors, raise that third just a little bit. Can you make that just a little bit more major? And that's asking you not to have the piano's E in that C, E, G chord, but have the E that sounds a little bit better. Okay? But the next song, we're in the key of, say, A. Now we want that E down just a little bit. Now, we can't really tell. I mean, what you're really doing is just trying to sing in tune. Or in Josh's case, he's trying to play in tune. But if we took a picture of Josh playing the E when E is the third of the chord, and then took another picture when he was playing the E that was the fifth of the A chord, it would be in just a slightly different spot. Hardly noticeable, but just a slightly different spot. The third of a chord is pushed toward the fourth if we're in major key. It's actually pushed the opposite direction if we want to see E flat G and we want it to be really minor. That E flat is pushed down a little bit. Now, we obviously can't do that on the piano. We have to take out or make it short by 2 cents per 5 seconds in order for it to come out even. And if we do that, the E is the E. It's the same E that you play in the C chord that you also play in the A chord. And so in other words, it kind of wipes out the best sound you can get.
So really there is no such thing as perfect tuning.
Well, there actually is. There actually is. Perfect tuning is where you can move the third sharp if it's an important triad, all right? Like the leading tone of the scale. In other words, when you play the C scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, when you get on that B, you want it to be as close to C as you can be, right? But later on, when you have another scale, B is only the fifth note, you don't want it to be that close to the C, so you don't quite play it in the same place. But again, on the piano, you have no choice. If we built a piano that was in pure tuning, it would either have to be in pure tuning to only play in one key, or it would have to have about 2,000 keys on it. Every single note, this would be the E you used when the E was the leading tone to F. This other E is the E you would use when it's the lower leading tone to D sharp. So, in other words, it wouldn't do very well. Now, all of that comes from sort of a very slow development. Back before the piano was invented, do you remember, anybody know what kind of keyboard instrument we used?
Harpsichord.
Harpsichord, yeah, that's correct. It looked like a little tiny piano, like a toy piano, and it just had one string per key, and it was only about this long, and it was not impossible to just tune it all the time. We tune regular pianos maybe once a year if we have time and if we have the money, but actually when you played the harpsichord, you tuned it yourself, just like we tune our
Guitar,
own instruments, but
yeah.
you know, we had to tune all of them. But, excuse me, prior to 16, and this is where my mind has, well, I used to be able to snap these dates off, and I'm going to say 1669, and it's close to that. It may not be the exact number, but up until 1669, everybody tuned the harpsichord in pure tuning. And what I mean by that is, if you were going to play concerto in D flat major, then you tuned, starting on the D flat, tuned the D flats together, then the A flats up a fifth, and the thirds you maybe tuned just so that it sounded really good. You turn that F nice and high, and all the way up through there, and then you played the thing in D flat, and it sounded wonderful. It sounded very good. But you could not then play also in D. The F sharps would be too sharp. What was A sharp before is now B flat, and those B flats would be too flat, okay? And you say, whoa, why doesn't it sound right? You'd have to go back, and now we're in D major, so we start tuning the whole thing again on D, and we tune it in pure tuning. Now, excuse me, so I don't know how long a harpsichord recital took, because, you know, unless he could find 6 pieces that were all in the same key, like, you know, I'm going to play the E flat major concerto, now I'm going to play the E flat major sonata, and now I'm going to play the E flat major fantasia. It'd be kind of boring, wouldn't it? Besides that, I'm not sure if you could find all those.
I have 4 different harpsichords.
Yeah, that's how they did it. They had 4 different harpsichords. My guess is everybody brought their own cigarettes, and in between each tune, everybody went out and smoked while the harpsichord player retuned the harpsichord to be in E flat major.
They didn't have cigarettes, they had snuff boxes.
Why were they required to drink their own cigarettes?
Because musicians were poor and couldn't buy extra.
I also have another question.
Uh-huh.
What's the name of the scale?
It's called the tempered tuning.
Tempered tuning?
Tempered tuning. Now, in 1669 or thereabouts, Bach wrote a tremendously popular and life-changing book called The Well-Tempered Clavier. And that was the first time that anybody had figured out how to temper tune a piano, or a harpsichord actually, or a clavier is what he was calling it, so that you could play a reasonable recital. Play sonata in C, and then concerto in F, and then fantasia in B flat. And basically it's just what I described to you. You just shaved off 2 cents per 5 seconds on the fifths, and then you could play it in a key. Now, to a certain extent, the guitar has to play somewhat in tempered tuning too, because the open strings have to be in one spot that you can't change, unless you, of course, twist the knob. And we find, how many guitar players in here? We find eventually that there are different ways to tune the guitar, and I'm not talking about different tunings as in drop D or anything like that. I'm talking about different ways to make the guitar sound better. And that is, instead of tuning each open string, we tune to the chord that is the most popular in the song. For instance, and perhaps the way we do that sometimes is we tune each open string, E and then A and then D and then G, and get them what we think is in tune. And then we play a G chord, and usually the B is out of tune. So you play that G chord again and adjust that B so that it sounds in tune. And what you've actually done is changed it to pure tuning, okay, instead of tempered tuning, all right? And so you play that way, and those chords sound okay, and then you stop and you say, well, now I want to play